Welcome back to another live and amplified Indie Fusion podcast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we are back at it again with another amazing broadcast. Today we have Alicia Harvey. How's it going today?
Going pretty good. How about you?
It's going pretty good. We were talking off air a little bit. It's that weird time of year where it's like hot but cold, and then allergies. So you don't know if you're sick, if you got allergies, if it's all this weird stuff. But after living in Texas for almost 5 years, you'd think I'd be used to it by now.
Nah, I don't think you ever get used to
Fair,
it. You
very
just suffer.
very fair, very fair. So, first off, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat with us. I'm really excited to kind of get know more about you. You just dropped a new EP, a self-titled EP, so that's got to be exciting. And then I know you're based out of Knoxville. So, how's kind of everything going for you right now? It seems like you're in a kind of a whirlwind time right now.
Yeah, it's been kind of busy the last year trying to get this album ready, and it's my first EP, so trying to get prepped to release that this year, and it's been kind of a crazy ongoing thing. But once it's finally released, it's like, okay, now what?
Fair.
What else is going to be thrown at me? So it's just busy, busy.
Fair. It's one of those things where it's like you rush to wait, you get the album out, and now it's like, okay. Do I start working on the next album? Do I try and tour off this
hmm
thing? Do I like what do I do now? And it's just kind of like one of those never-ending questions, I guess. You're right.
Well,
So,
especially when you're an artist and it's your first EP, you're kind of just dipping your toe in and trying to figure it out as you go anyway. So you're kind of
right.
like, okay, now what? So I'm
Fair.
gonna see what's going next. And so I'm
Yeah.
just been trying to promote the album for sure.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll definitely jump into the album here in a little bit, but so you're based out of Knoxville,
hmm
but you're originally born in Nashville,
hmm
so you're pretty much born and raised in Tennessee. What was that like growing up for you?
It was real great. Growing up in the Nashville area, you know, you're always surrounded by the great musicians, and I
Right.
always thought, oh gosh, I'm not good enough to jump into that pool quite yet. So it intimidated me a little bit growing up, and so I didn't do too much growing up out there as far as music goes. But
Mm.
you know, I played since I was 9 and did a little music at home and stuff. And when my family would talk me into it, but once I moved to Knoxville, that's kind of when I decided to get my feet wet a little bit because I couldn't find any live music that I wanted to hear in
Mm.
Knoxville, and I was like, yeah, I'm used to Nashville where everywhere has live music and I want to see some country music. Well, I didn't see any girls doing what I was doing. So I hopped in and just dug my feet in.
Fair, very fair. W- Do you think it was the glow of Nashville that kind of deterred you originally from performing, or?
Yeah, and you know, you hear all the kind of horror stories of oh, don't do music unless you're under 21, and here I was in my late 20s going, that doesn't sound right.
Right.
But you know, of course, I let it get to me, and I was like, okay, I guess they're right. You know, that I
Yeah,
had no idea.
fair.
But yeah, it's
It,
just one of
it
those things. It's you don't know what it's like until you dig in.
yeah, for sure. It's one of those weird things where I think a lot of people kind of get turned off to the fact that the only place you can play is bars, and so that automatically excludes anyone over the age of 21. And it's like,
hmm
yes, if that's what you want to play in, but you got like all these other things. And so I think you might have just had some not so good information at that time
Yeah,
in
for
your life.
sure.
So,
Well, I
um,
felt like some of those musicians out there, they don't really want to share the information too much.
yeah,
It's kind of a weird. I guess they fall into a certain group of people. You got to
yeah,
find your people.
for sure.
That was the key. And so I've learned that now, just being in Knoxville and observing from this side of the state. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how it works.
Fair, fair, fair. Oh, so even growing up in Nashville, though, you mentioned that you still sang every
hmm
once in a while. Like, were you singing like in church or just covers, or like what kind of performing were you doing at that point?
Mainly, I was just doing it at home. I
Mm.
wasn't really doing much out. You know, every now and then my family would talk me into doing things I didn't really want to do, but I would get out and do it. I was like, gosh, I don't want to do this, Mom. You're going to make me get out and sing in front of people. I can't believe you're going to make me do this. But just occasional stuff, but mainly just doing it at home.
Fair, fair. That works. And then, what like was your family musical, or was this just kind of something you always had interest in?
I guess they were kind of musical. My mom was a little bit. She was in choir in school, and
Okay,
her brothers were in the band, and so that kind of trickled down to me a little bit. And so it
yeah,
wasn't like an immediate thing, but it was there.
fair. So it was kind of a combination of your family kind of having a history in music, but then
Hmm.
also being in Nashville, and anywhere you go, you've got. I'm sure the bucket drummers weren't out. I was just in Nashville last week, and like every other like corner, it was the bucket drummers just kind of going at it. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'm back in Chicago, because we had those all over the place when I was growing up in Chicago. But yeah, so but like anywhere you went in Nashville, I would assume there was always somebody playing music within close proximity.
For sure, but Nashville today is a whole lot different than it was in the '90s. In the
Mm,
'90s, my parents are like, "You don't want to be down there by yourself, and don't go alone." And of course, I was too young to be alone,
fair,
but it's quite gotten quite popular, in the last 10 years, especially for sure.
fair, fair, fair. So then you move out to Knoxville, and at what age were you when you moved out to Knoxville?
I've been in Knoxville about 9 years, so I came when I was 29 and started doing the music thing around that time. I started dabbling in a little bit, nothing too serious, but just songwriter nights here and there or open mics, trying to get my feet wet because I was still kind of terrified of the stage a little bit.
Yeah,
So I was just like, okay, let's try this out and see what it's like not in Nashville, where
yeah.
everybody's good.
What would you say, that was like more stage fright or just scared of performing in general?
I think it was a little bit of both.
Okay. How
Yeah.
was there a moment that you kind of got over that, or was it just kind of like gradually over time that you just
I
kind of
think
got comfortable?
I think gradually over time, it just the more I did it, the more comfortable I became. And finally, I was like, oh, I'm getting validation. People are actually telling me I'm good. Okay, maybe I'm okay at this.
Yeah.
Maybe I should try this out.
Nice. And so at this time, this is you said about 9 years ago, so this is like
Hmm.
mid 2010s.
Like
What was
2014.
the independent scene like in Knoxville at this point?
There's always been a scene. I feel like not a lot of people really know unless you're in the town. It's got a pretty good music scene. Quite a few musicians, musician jams, open mics, writers' nights are getting started around here. And I think Tennessee, as Nashville spreads out, I think the musicians have spread out. And trickled over into East Tennessee. And of course, you've got Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, which
Mm,
that's like the whole theater scene. Like a lot of the musicians play out there, but
mm,
that's a different environment than what
yeah.
we do over here. But I think everybody kind of just trickles in from Knoxville, and it's kind of a good middle point compared to I think there's a can't remember what they told me, but they're like where the interstates cross in
Hmm.
Knoxville. It's like
Yeah.
one of the busiest intersections or something in the United States.
That's cool. That's probably okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because that's like connecting the East Coast, the West Coast,
Hmm.
and North and South. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. But then, obviously, you kind of touched on something that was interesting there as Nashville kind of expands out, because everything's getting so expensive there. The rest of Tennessee is gonna benefit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I wouldn't be surprised in the next 10, 15 years if Tennessee is just the music capital, period.
Oh
If it
yeah, for
instead
sure.
of, so because
Well, have
like,
you ever seen the documentary, the Ken Burns country music documentary?
no, I haven't.
It's like a 7 or 8 part series, and it's a really long series. It's pretty interesting, but it kind of tells you how country music got its start in East Tennessee,
Oh
and
well.
that's kind of I always found that interesting. I'm like, oh, Knoxville almost was Music City
Hmm.
back
Nice.
way back when. So it's an interesting documentary you should check out.
I'll have to check that out. I'm always looking for a good music documentary. So
Hmm.
I will write that down.
Yeah.
And it so that just growing up in Tennessee in general, I feel like you were like, even just having remote interests growing up in Nashville, I
Hmm.
feel like you were predisposed to becoming a musician kind of once you found
Hmm.
your comfortability with being on stage, you found your voice and all that stuff.
Hmm.
As you were kind of going through that journey over the last 10 years or so, once you moved to Knoxville and kind of started playing out more, started exploring music a little bit more. What was the process like of finding your voice? Were you listening to a certain type of music, or did you always kind of know what you wanted to do as far as musically speaking?
Yeah, starting at a young age, my mom was always listening to country music, and so that kind of is where that influence started.
Mm,
And we might touch on this later, but my grandmother owned a bar in the late '80s in Nashville, and I was always trying to get quarters to play the jukebox. I was 3 years old, being potty trained in this bar, and so that's kind of where the whole country music thing started for me. My love for it, and came down from my mom, and so that kind of trickled on over, and that's always been a big love of mine. So when I started doing music over here, like I said before, there wasn't anybody really doing the country music thing as a chick playing guitar like I wanted to do. And so
mm,
I was like, well, I'm going to start doing that.
fair.
But
Eh,
come to find out, there are a few girls doing it, but they're kind of hard to find.
yeah, it's it's they're hard to find, but I get what you're saying. Like your sound is so unique and I love it. Like I've had the opportunity to listen to the new EP, kind of hard
Mhm.
transitioning into the EP right now, but
Yeah, yeah,
um, it like you have such a cool sound and unique and it's real and it's authentic. And as people kind of listen to it and hopefully as if they're listening to this podcast and they go and listen to the interview or to the EP afterwards, it's just like that authenticity that you convey that like I feel like everything that you're saying on the song is the truth.
yeah, for
Does that
sure.
make sense?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
So
You described it well.
I
That's what
try.
I was going for. So.
For sure. So, you said that you'd been working before we kind of jumped into everything. You'd mentioned that you'd been working a really long time to try and get this EP out. Was that due to like the pandemic? Does it go with that far back, or is this kind of more of a recent adventure for you?
Kind of when I started seriously performing, it was around 2019.
Hmm.
And so, like, when I started really digging in.
Hmm.
So it kind of was at the beginning, right before the pandemic, that I kind of started the whole writing process. And I knew eventually I wanted to release some music. I would release a couple of songs here and there, but I knew that once I started writing and I wanted to prepare for a project, and of course, finances played into that as well. So for the year before I released the album, I ran a crowdfunding campaign through my website, and so
Hmm.
that's how I funded the album. And so that was part of what took the time as well. So over the course of about 4 years, that's about how long it took for me to make it.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you were dead set on it being a bigger project or a fuller project.
Hmm.
So you waited, you took your time instead of trying to like rush the process just to get out music, which
Right.
in the meantime, you were still releasing music anyways, right? Am I not
I
mistaken?
released a song or two here and there, just kind of just trying to get something out there, and stuff that I'd been working on for a long time
Gotcha.
that had been written years ago.
Gotcha. Now, was that stuff like more self-produced stuff, or was that just like one-off recordings before the pandemic had hit and whatnot?
A little bit of both. I mean,
Okay.
they're all my songs are self-produced or co-produced. The album was co-produced, but those other songs were self-produced and released. One was written as a favor to a friend, so that was kind of a tribute to a friend's husband that had passed away,
Oh
and
wow.
co-wrote that with a friend of mine. So that was a little more country, and so that was released in 2017, and then 2019 I won a like an acoustic throwdown competition, and that
Mm.
what the winnings was a recording. So that's when I released "You Didn't Love Me." So that was a song I wrote probably back in 2010 or 2011. That was like one of the first songs I wrote.
Sick. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Hmm.
And then obviously 2020 does what 2020 did. And does that like completely stop the music for you, or how do you kind of respond to that situation?
Well, actually, it kind of did the opposite for me. I was just kind of starting out, getting my feet wet in the
Mhm.
gigging field, and I had a few places that actually were still booking during kind of
Mm,
on the tail end of the pandemic but we were still taking social distancing very
yeah,
serious and checking your temperature and testing
all
and
that.
all
Yeah,
that thing. And so I actually had quite a few gigs in 2020, 2021, more than you'd think. But so it didn't slow me down too much because I was kind of just getting started as it was.
gotcha, gotcha. So, uh, jumping back into the full length album. Sorry, we're kind of going all over the place here, but it's cool. Oh, so you've dropped the your debut EP, self-titled EP, Alicia Harvey.
Hmm.
Um, what was the original thought process behind this? Like when you started writing, were you specifically writing for an album, or did it kind of become, oh, hey, I've got all these songs. They kind of work. Let's see what we can do.
It was mainly I was trying to write for the album,
Okay.
and like I said, I knew eventually I wanted to release something that was a full body of work from me. And
Mm,
I got with a couple of writers that have been writing a lot in Knoxville, and I knew I needed more co-writing experience, so I kind of leaned on them to help me co-write quite a bit of the album. And so that's we started doing that probably in 2021.
mm,
And that's I already had two songs that were my originals that I wrote by myself, but the rest of the other four songs were co-written and over the course of the last couple years.
gotcha, gotcha.
Hmm.
And when you were kind of going through this process, what what were you wanting the album were you wanting the album to say anything, or like what was the original plans, I guess, is the best way I can ask that.
I mainly just wanted like a summary of okay, this is who I am, and these are some true stories about my life. There's a song on there, "Losing," the first
Mm,
single. That wasn't a true story. That was just something we wrote. Just I needed a good upbeat honky tonk song,
mm,
and so that's what I wanted with that one. But the rest of the songs are true stories from my life, and um, I just kind of wanted that to be, hey, this is what I do, and this is what I'm about, and I hope you guys like it, kind of thing.
gotcha. Fair enough. So you kind of going in, you kind of knew what you wanted to be, what you wanted to do, so there wasn't really much experimenting going on.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much knew how I wanted the songs to sound. When I started the writing process, I had the idea in my head, and luckily, I've got some great musicians on there that picked up on what I wanted, and I'm like, okay, this is what I want.
Hmm.
Let's, I'll let you have complete freedom on what you do, and it just happened to all work out like I wanted
Sweet.
it to. I didn't have to send any edits or anything like that. I'm like, that was perfect. First take. Let's roll with it.
That's cool. That's cool. It's like I said before, I absolutely love the full project at the
Thank you.
EP. It's it what like it woke me up this morning, which was kind of odd. Like I was listening. Oh, what was I listening to this morning on my way into work? I was like, I didn't sleep well last night or something, and it must have been losing because you said that was the
Probably.
more
That's the
upbeat.
first song. So it's like, let's hit them
Yeah,
hard.
and so I got off the phone with my dad, and I was like, okay, well, I've still got a 10-minute car ride. How am I going to pull this one off? And that song came on, and I'm like, that'll do it. And so
Yep.
yeah,
That'll
it
wake
was
you
a
up.
it'll do it. So now with the EP out, and it's like, obviously 4 or 5 years of hard work kind of not coming to an end, but starting the next chapter of the journey, which is supporting
Mhm.
the album. What's kind of running through your mind right now? Where's your head at with everything?
Well, of course, with life, I still have to work a full time job.
Right.
So I don't have the luxury to go on a tour or anything like I would like. But I figure, the best way I can do it is just promote it as best I can on the internet and just advertise and promote it at my shows and sell what CDs and stuff I can and just see what
Mm,
happens.
yeah. Well, I mean, one of the cool things about Knoxville, and I guess the entire state of Tennessee in general, is it's kind of in the perfect spot to do like little weekend runs. Like
Hmm.
if you want to go from Knoxville to Baltimore, what is that? Like couple hours, or is that
That's probably more like a 7-hour drive as far as
More like I said,
Baltimore
okay,
goes.
but
But we're like within like 2, 3 hours of Atlanta and Chattanooga.
yeah,
You're not
okay,
far from Lexington and Louisville, Kentucky, and then of course Nashville. You're about 2.5 hours to Nashville.
yeah.
So
So, but yeah, so obviously Baltimore is a little bit of a reach, but it in my head I was like, no, Baltimore's like right there. So,
I was like, well, maybe depends on how fast you drive.
maybe. But just like having that access to be like, I I've got Saturday, and if I really want to, Sunday, and then you can get out in front of new faces, and you're not like kind
Hmm.
of bleeding yourself dry in Knoxville, because I gotta know how, like, Knoxville, that's a pretty decent sized city, right?
Yeah, and I've been booked out as far as gigs go for the probably the last 6 months. I've had most of 2024 booked out.
Oh wow.
So there's a ton around here, especially north of town. There's like three or four. Well, there's a huge lake up by probably about 30, 40 minutes from Knoxville, and there are tons of marinas that we end up playing in the summertime, and so that's the majority of what goes on in my summer. So you get a lot of people from all over. Like I know that there's one marina in particular that has a lot of folks from Ohio and northern Kentucky, because I guess they don't have as many lakes or something up that way, so they come down in vacation in the summer down this way. So you still get that exposure of to people that
Right.
aren't necessarily from Tennessee, and so that's kind of the circuit I've been doing for the last year, and so I'm kind of filling that out. And then next year, I'm hoping to spread out a little bit more. Maybe
Yeah.
do a Key West run. I know a lot of my friends do go down to Key West and do some shows down there, and so
Yeah.
hoping to maybe do that in 2025.
Key West is really cool because they've got like actually all the entire Florida Keys is like really open to singers, like more, they do a little bit more singer songwriter stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but they love country music in general.
Mm-hmm.
They've got like singer song the singer
The Songwriter
songwriter
Festival.
fest. They
Yep.
got Mile Zero Fest, so they've got a whole bunch of stuff down there, which is really cool. And
Mm-hmm.
even if as you come up the keys into the middle keys and the upper keys, they have
Mm-hmm.
uh a lot. Obviously, Key West is like the big attraction because that's where all this ships go, and all that fun stuff.
Yep.
But
Yep.
even in the middle and upper keys, they've still got really cool music festivals and
Mm-hmm.
their own kind of thing going on there. So that's cool. Um,
Yep.
so you're pretty much playing around Knoxville and that area for
Mm-hmm.
the majority of 2024.
Yeah, for the time being, I'm pretty much in East Tennessee, mainly the Knoxville area for the rest of 2024. Um, but yeah, I'm
Cool.
open to traveling once I can get it in.
Right. I 100% feel that. So where are you kind of at creatively right now? Are you, obviously you just released this EP. Are you writing right now? Are you even concerned about like releasing another single? Or are you gonna kind of just like, where are you at?
Well, I just released Out of the Blue, kind of as the second single off the album, and so I'm kind of just working on riding on promoting that and the EP, of course. And then as far as creatively goes, I'm one of these writers that it has to hit me at the right time to really
Mm,
write a song. And I'm always trying to write and always trying to find co-writing opportunities, just mainly for the experience. And hey, if a
mm,
good song comes out of it, you never know.
for sure.
But I'm kind of just riding it and seeing what happens.
For sure. Do you find that you have to be more disciplined with your writing, trying to balance a life, your music, career? Do you find you have to be more disciplined with your writing?
I think it just depends. It depends on where I am mentally.
Mm,
It's I've gone through a lot in the last year. I've lost my mom, and so that's been a tough one. So I've been kind of I wrote a couple of songs out of that with my friends that are on
mm,
the EP, and so that's kind of been it's been a downer. So I don't do well when I'm down. You would think the opposite, but I tend to just kind of disconnect from writing when it comes to that.
yeah. I went through something very similar back in 2021. I lost my mom and I kind of disconnected from everything, and
Hmm.
it was a rough time. So I feel your pain on that one. So
Yeah, yeah, it sucks.
yeah. Um, so sorry to hear about the loss of your
Yeah,
mother,
thank
and
you.
I'm glad that you were able to still to move forward with the release of the EP and got that out? Because I'm sure, like my mother, she was one of your biggest supporters.
Oh yeah, she was my number one supporter, and she would have wanted me to keep on going. So
Yep.
she was so proud of me. She did get to see me play a real big show in Nashville back in 2021, and so that was pretty nice to have her there
Nice.
because my family's still in Nashville, so that was
Nice.
nice.
Awesome.
And then she
Awesome.
saw me a couple of weeks before she passed away. She got to see me perform, so
Oh well.
I feel good about it.
That's good. That's good. Um, you'd mentioned you kind of mentioned an interesting story about your grandmother owning a bar.
In the
Do you
late
mind
'80s.
expanding upon that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, and actually this, song "Gun Totin' Granny" came out of that,
Yeah.
the late '80s, bad part of Nashville, still kind of a bad part of Nashville, but,
Was it Antioch?
no, it was Dickerson Road.
Okay.
Which, they're trying to make it a little better,
Fair.
because it's close to downtown,
Yeah.
so but, she owned this bar, and, she was a tough woman, you didn't mess with her, she carried a gun on her hip, and,
Nice.
I was, being potty trained there. My mom was big and pregnant with my brother, and I always say in my shows, if that's not a country song, I don't know what is.
Fair. That's good.
So we ended up coming up with that idea for Gun Toting Granny and wrote that song, put it on the EP.
Nice. That's cool.
Hmm.
So you'd mentioned that you were putting like quarters in the jukebox. Is
Yep.
was that kind of your first real experience with music or
From what I remember, I mean, I don't remember a ton of it because I was
yeah,
so young, but
yeah,
yeah, my mom was telling me that I would always hustle for the quarters and try to get quarters from the regular drinkers,
fair.
and they'd always give me the quarters because I had the curly hair, and so they thought I was cute, and they're like, "Oh, we'll give her quarters to go play the jukebox." So I played George Strait, Randy Travis, all the
Nice.
good ones.
Nice.
Hmm.
Nice. That's really cool. Oh, and did you kind of make I'm assuming you probably made the connection the later in the night it got, the easier it became to get the quarters.
Probably, I'm sure I did.
It's like,
Like, oh, look at
oh,
all these quarters I have.
right? It's like, oh, the more of those they drink, the more quarters I get. So let's make sure they
Yeah,
drink plenty
yeah.
of that stuff, whatever it is.
Yeah, there's a line in the song that even it says, "I knew all the regulars and the drinks that they bought." My mom told me that I used to know. Oh, there's Billy. He drinks a Bush Light. I see him walking in the door, so I'd climb up on a stool, grab his Bush Light, and have it waiting for him.
That's funny. That's great. Oh,
Oh boy.
bar people and
Hmm.
their habits. You know,
Yes, yes.
that's great. I love it. So now that the EP is out and you're playing shows, you mentioned that you're booked up pretty good in
Hmm.
2024. When you do get some time to not have to worry about music or your job, what are you doing to kind of decompress everything, or is music kind of that decompression?
In a way, music is a decompression because when I'm not playing, I'm going to somebody else's concerts. So I'm a big concert goer. I go see Ashley McBride, Terry Clark, all the I just love country music, and so I go see concerts all the time. So that's kind of my decompression. We take little weekend trips to go to Georgia or Kentucky
Yeah,
or whoever, and so yeah.
nice. What's like the most obscure like country show? Did you see anybody like at a bar before they made it big, or what's like the most obscure situation you've been in?
Yeah, growing up in Nashville, actually, Lady A, I used to go see them before anybody knew who they were.
Yeah.
I saw them right the night they got their record deal, and I was
Wow.
like, "Well, I'll never see them again, not in this bar."
Wow.
So I
That's
got to see them. That was pretty cool.
nice.
Trying to think if there's anybody else. Ashley McBride, we started seeing her when she was just starting her career.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty
I
cool. Pretty neat
feel
to
like
watch these people.
yeah. I feel like it's in Nashville, it's almost an unfair advantage. Like you go into any bar and it's like, oh, that person could be somebody in five, you know. So
Yep, you just never know who you're
yeah.
gonna see. I mean, and a lot of the celebrities they still go out and listen to some of this live music. So you'd be like, oh, there's Sarah Evans. I'm like, she was at a Lady
Yeah.
A show before they were famous. I'm like, there's
Oh,
Sarah Evans. That's
wow.
cool.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
remember one of the first country shows I ever went to. I was interning for a baseball team,
Hmm.
and the regional Pepsi distributor they would rent out the baseball stadium every like May or June or whatever it was, and they'd throw an employee appreciation day, and it
Nice.
would be a huge music festival, like just
Nice.
for their employees. It was like a country
Wow.
music festival thing. And the one year I went, I got to see Little Big Town
Nice.
before, like, I think Boondocks had just come out, so
Oh, nice.
it
Yeah.
was like just starting to make the waves. But like Kelly Pickler was the big name, because I don't know if she had just gotten off of American Idol or whatever it was,
Hmm.
but she was like the big name, and then it was like Little Big Town and Boondocks had just came out, and I'm like, okay, I know that song. I don't know who the band is, but I know the song. And then there was a couple of other musicians that were on there and that had done a little bit of something at the time, but it was really cool to kind of see them right before they really blew up to where they're at now.
Yeah, and I thought of one more. I saw Eric Church open up for Sarah Evans back in 2006.
That's
That's when his
cool.
first album just came out. And I was like, yeah, this is a pretty good album. This is pretty good music. And then he blew up.
That's sick. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's I told myself I need to start getting out to more shows. Like I go out when I can, but I'm so worried about getting the podcast produced that
Oh yeah.
it's like, oh, edit the podcast or go to a show. Let's edit the podcast. Let's get
Yep.
this done, and then I'll figure out the show. But
Exactly.
no, that's really cool. Um, so I don't want to keep you here too much longer. If anybody wants to check out the music, any of that stuff, where's the best place to find you?
Hey, you can go to my website at aharveymusic.com. And then, of course, I'm on all the socials at aharveymusic. And because Alicia is a little hard to spell, so it's just A Harvey Music.
Okay,
And yeah, I've got all the tour dates on the website and Facebook, and all the music's out there on the streaming platforms. And yeah,
cool. And then before we wrap this up, what's one piece of advice you have for the young musicians out there?
don't be afraid to get out there and try because you never know what's going to happen.
Fair. Very fair.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
no problem.
Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch y'all later.